In this lesson, we're going to be discussing creating, saving, and opening documents. If you'd like to set up a new document, there's a number of ways you can get into the dialog box. One of the ways is in the welcome screen, you can hit Create New Document. Or you can go under the File menu to New Document. Or just press Command-N or Control-N on a PC, and you'll end up in the dialog box. The very first setting is Document Preset. There's only one document preset that exists with InDesign when you first get it, which is the default, which is what you're looking at. We'll be talking more about document presets a little bit later. The next area is Intent. What is this document going to be used for? By default, it's a print document, which basically means all of the settings are correct for print, including CMYK as color. Some other intents could be the web, which would be RGB, or digital publishing. If I were to choose one of these other intents, let's say digital publishing, certain things are going to change. You could see that all of the measurements are actually in pixels. And one of the choices for digital publishing is actually the iPad. There's also the Kindle Fire or Nook and the Android 10-inch or the iPhone. But let's stick with the iPad for now. You can set up a certain number of columns with a certain gutter. You could have margins, but everything, as you'll notice, is in pixels. Let's go back to Print and go to the next area, which is Number of Pages. You can actually set up the number of pages that you want in a document right from the very beginning. So if I wanted 8 pages, I would just have to type 8 in the field. Facing pages is for when you want to design in spreads. In other words, any kind of a document that has a left and a right page. Start page number. I can start the page numbering, the automatic page numbering on any page number. So if I were to change this to 5, it would start on page 5, which can be very useful if I'm working on a newspaper and I'm working on a section that doesn't start on page 1. I'm going to go back to page 1. Primary text frame, what is that about? It's similar to what master text frames were in previous versions of InDesign. It's a text frame that if you were to place text in it and there wasn't enough room in the text frame, it would automatically add the correct number of pages to contain all of the text. Page size, there's certain preset page sizes, like for instance letter, legal, tabloid, a bunch of European sizes, as well as US business card and compact disc. I'm going to leave it at letter for now, but you can see I'm working in picas. If I wanted to work in inches, I would actually have to change my preferences, which we talked about in a previous lesson. Orientation, if I don't want the default portrait page, I can click on landscape and all it's doing is switching around the numbers in the width and the height field. I can set up a certain number of columns if I wanted just by clicking the up arrow, and the gutter is the space between those columns. Margins are the area to the outside of the document that generally nothing important will fall within. It's kind of like a little space between the trim and the important items in your layout. So it gives you like this little buffer zone with nothing in it. So when the document gets cut, you have no chance of losing anything important. But it also gives you a nice amount of air around the entire layout. If I wanted to increase this, all I would have to do is click the up arrow. If I wanted to decrease it, click the down arrow. If your dialog doesn't look like this, chances are you've already clicked on more options. And you can see there's a bleed area. Now, normally I don't work in picas, but because InDesign is a calculator in all of its measurement fields, I can actually type inches in here if I'd like. I will type 0.125 and then an inch mark for inches. And if I click anywhere else, I'll have the correct amount of points that it would be for bleed all the way around because they are all linked together. So the bleed is going to be the same all the way around. Bleed is actually for any objects that you want to go right to the edge of your trim to the edge of your page. The reason for this is if something went right to the edge of the trim and then it was not cut perfectly, you may have a little slither of white along one of the edges if the cutting was just a little bit off. To avoid that little slither of white, 1/8 of an inch is added all the way around. That is pretty much the standard in the industry, although you will see bleeds that are bigger than that, so you have to talk to your printer. What is slug? Well, I can tell you what it's not. It's not a slow-moving snail or a punch in the face. It is actually an area to the outside of your trim that you may want to have information that doesn't print unless you want it to. Like, for instance, if I had a slug area towards the bottom, let me just increase this. How about I type some inches in here? It'll be much easier for me. I'm just going to type in 1 inch. You can see that is not linked together by default, so I'm only going to get an inch slug area at the bottom. It's actually going to make guides that I need to stay within if I wanted this information to print when I print including my slug area. Okay, I'm ready to just click OK, but before I do that, if this is a page size and specifications that I'll be using again and again, I can save this as a preset. It will actually save a whole bunch of time the next time I need this kind of document with the same specifications. I'm just going to hit cancel, but normally that preset that I'm saving would be added to the document presets to the top. I'm just going to click OK and show you that I am actually going to get a document with all the specifications that I asked for, including bleed, which is the red line all the way around, and my margins. The page is horizontal because that's the orientation that I selected. And let me go to my pages panel, and you can see that it actually did set it up in spreads. And page 1 is sitting by itself to the right-hand side of the gutter, which is the fold. And page 8, the last page, is sitting to the left side of that gutter. Now, how would I save this document? What you would do is go to File, Save As. All I have to do is name the document, and I also have to choose what format I want to save it in. There's 3 choices: InDesign CS6 document, InDesign CS6 template. What is that about? You can save a layout as a template and then use it again and again. When you open a template, it's going to open it as an untitled document. So that way you can't mess up the original template. You actually have to save it with a different name. It's a way to use the look over and over again as a starting point for what it is you want to do. And for the first time ever, you can actually save a document in a lower version. So if I were to do that, I'm going to get a warning that's going to let me know that I can open this as far back as CS4. But a word of caution, anything that's a new feature will not work in the older version of InDesign. So you do have to be careful. And I've actually seen it that even features that aren't new, strange things can happen when you backsave. Okay. Now, we could save our document, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to hit cancel. We're going to talk about ways that you can open documents. The first is pretty obvious. Go to File, Open. And all you have to do is navigate to the file you want to open. Let me just open anything from our sample files, and it's going to open it right up. Let me close this and the untitled document that I was working on. There is another way to open documents that kind of is an undocumented secret. If you're working on a Mac using Application Frame, which makes the entire window into one unit, I've mentioned this in a previous lesson. The way you turn Application Frame on a Mac is to simply check it under the window menu. If you're working on a PC, it is already working this way. That's the way a PC works. So it makes the whole thing one window and gives you the gray background that kind of covers your entire screen, so it's not distracting. There is another benefit of application frame, whether you're working on a Mac or a PC. If you double-click on the gray background with nothing open, it automatically will go to open a file, so that can save you some time in opening the files that you want. We're going to continue talking about creating layouts in the next lesson.